What I'm about to tell you sounds crazy. It's true. And you have to listen to me.
Stop making characters like this, and learn to make them more like this.
Live Die Repeat is a big-budget sci-fi action movie from 2014 where an army of aliens has invaded the Earth to such an extent that the only hope for humanity left is, as expected, Tom Cruise. Except this time he plays an inexperienced coward who accidentally gains the ability to reset time after each death, which allows him to keep trying to save the world until he can do it. And the best way to describe this movie is that it's essentially a film adaptation of a really tough single-player video game where you have to fail again and again and again until you grow good enough to beat it. And there's a lot of great useful things to learn about Live Die Repeat, because despite its horribly bland marketing campaign, it really is one of the best movies of its kind. I know I joked around with that in my Tomorrow War video, but here it's genuinely the case, and you only have to look at the writer credits to understand why. You know, the action is amazing, the aliens are specifically special, the character work is compelling. I mean, we have Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt fighting monsters in badass exo-suits. Like, what more could you possibly want? But I'd argue that the very biggest strength of this movie that not only got it sold and produced, but also serves as the engine for all its good qualities, is the concept. We've talked about high concept material before in both positive and negative ways, but I feel like this movie is the perfect opportunity to learn and elaborate more on the topic, because it really is a masterclass at it, in terms of how it marries multiple different conceptual elements into one at the start, in terms of how it utilizes its concept more than 99% of other movies in the middle, and in terms of how it doesn't let concept come in the way of emotional intimacy at the end.
I love you.
So today, let's look at Live Die Repeat from beginning to end through the lens of concept to identify not only what makes it great, but also how all of us can get our own high concept movie scripts sold and produced with superstar actors like TC and Emily Blunt at the front. Also, it's once again time to give a shout out to an old Filmento ally from the past, because it allowed me to see this movie even though it's not available in Krakow's Netflix. But I'll do that after we first talk about marriage. The beginning concept lesson to learn from Live Die Repeat is how it combines many different conceptual elements into one functional movie, because in most cases it would be 3 movies. The first main conceptual element is the alien invasion, where essentially a colony of hostile monsters fell to Earth in a meteor and then quickly killed everyone in Europe, which has now led humanity to launch one last massive assault. And even though this is a very extraordinary element that requires some suspension of disbelief, on its own, it's totally fine, because usually the audience is willing to accept one unusual thing, no matter how quote-unquote unreal it may be. Whereas the second main conceptual element is the time loop, where essentially Cage gains a time-created immortality that allows him to wake up in the day before the battle after each death, and this way keep trying again and again. And in most movies, this would pose a problem, because now you're asking the audience to simultaneously go along with aliens and time travel, which kind of feels like you're forcibly smashing 2 different movies together. This was an issue in the Tomorrow War, for example, where it was like, hey, there's aliens, and oh yeah, by the way, humanity just happened to figure out time travel as well. Like, I don't know about that.
How do you think that looks?
And the way Live Die Repeat makes this work is by marrying the second element to the first to the point where they become one and the same.
Whenever an alpha is killed, an automatic response is triggered. The omega starts the day over again, but you see this time it can remember what's going to happen just like you do.
Right, so the entire method of how the aliens conquer worlds is based on them being able to learn their opponent's actions and then reset the fight to adapt and overcome.
That's right, we're gonna cheat.
And the way Cage gains that ability is by half-accidentally killing a super rare alpha alien that's tied to the time-controlling Omega Hive and, you know. As in, now one equals the other. If you're willing to accept aliens with non-human alien abilities, you're already on board with the time loop. Now there's just one movie to get into. Obviously, people's capability to suspend disbelief is always different, but I'm just saying that a movie with zombies and a biblical natural disaster will always feel like much more of a mess than a movie with zombies that cause a flood by overrunning a dam or something. One equals another. The third main conceptual element here is the exo-suit technology, which should be a problem because it doesn't come from the aliens like the time loop. It's not like in District 9 where the advanced weaponry is stolen from the aliens. Here the aliens don't have physical weapons, but the way it's still made organic is by keeping it grounded enough. See, we've all seen videos about those hydraulic robotics and whatever. They're part of our current reality enough to the point where seeing these suits being used in the near future to specifically fight a highly physical enemy isn't that much of an extra stretch. If the suits could time travel and turn invisible, then yeah, but not these big clunky battery-powered prisons of hydraulic rusty steel. They feel like a real organic part of this world that you don't necessarily have to buy into separately. Just like invisibility cloaks in Harry Potter, just like blind aliens with incredible hearing in A Quiet Place. At least in the eyes of the majority. Everybody's suspension of disbelief is different.
No way, because magic and invisibility are not the same, and also aliens don't have good hearing, and also exosuits aren't a real thing, and therefore I cannot take this movie seriously. I only watch real cinema.
Point is that because Hollywood has done so much already, you do need to dip into multiple pools to build something new and special. You just have to make sure that the result is one thing, because a movie with aliens and superheroes and Nordic gods, that's just ridiculous. If you have a cinematic universe where you can normalize these things one movie at a time, that's different, that's fine. But when you're selling all this to the audience at once, it's not a movie, it's many different movies fighting each other. And I think the perfect final metaphor for what I mean with all this is the massive sword used by Emily Blunt's Rita Retaski. At face value, the sword is straight from some Japanese anime that should just look really dumb in a Western setting. But because we see it as part of this big clunky exosuit designed to fight physically lethal monsters, it doesn't look dumb. It gels in to be a piece of this bigger thing where it clearly belongs. And that's what you want here. Each extraordinary conceptual element must equal another. But if you need one more outside the box example of this, here's one that allows me to do my shout out at the same time. It's basically like if we lived in a dark dystopian world where douchebag streaming services geolock their content based on region to prevent people from seeing all of it, and then because of that humanity built this ingenious blue button to circumvent those geolocks and unlock all streaming content everywhere. Well, this world is very real, and that blue button is Surfshark, a true sci-fi VPN capable of switching your internet location with a click. They're sponsoring this video with an 83% off discount with 3 extra months for free by using code FILM. So since I'm sure you've never heard of a VPN before, this is how you gain access to geographically locked content. This is how you do sus things on the internet without anyone being able to see your IP or who you are. This is how you get deals that are cheaper in different locations. So check the link below to get Surfshark's blue sci-fi button for yourself, help out the channel, thanks. The middle concept lesson to take here is how pretty much everything Live Die Repeat does, it sources from its main conceptual elements, to the point where it's tough to do it justice without showing the full movie, but let's speedrun through the key stuff in the second act. The main hero is a high-ranking coward who's never seen battle in his life, which is the perfect fit for a time loop war movie because now he can go from a 0 to 100. It's really compelling to see him fall on his face in the first landing and then keep his visor on in the next and then stay on his feet in the next and so on and so on. It's awesome to see him grow from a nobody into this badass fighter.
What's his name again?
Whereas if Cage already had some fighting skills, suddenly a third of his journey would lose its value. The key relationship is the one Cage has with Rita, who's not just anyone, but someone who's already gone through the same loop experience in an earlier battle.
What happened to you happened to me. I had it, I lost it.
Which allows the relationship to explore some really unique and interesting things, because where else will you find a mentor who's become so numb to death that she'll just leave her rescuer to die?
Just take my battery.
Where else will you find a mentor relationship that's based on the mentor killing the pupil again and again?
On your feet, maggot! Maggot! Maggot!
And it leads to some really powerful emotional stuff as well, but I'll get to that later. Point is that because the relationship is built on the conceptual elements, it can be something very special. Same thing with action and challenges and obstacles. When we're storming France, all the dropships and exosuit warfare against aliens and whatever very clearly distinguish it from other movies. Like for example with the initial big problem of having to get the exosuit safety off. It's not the most common battle sequence problem. And oh, since the point of the action here revolves around failure and death, that's what happens much more than usual, not only to the main hero, but also in other circumstances as well, like with the supporting A-list actor just immediately... All the greatest comedy comes from the fact that Cage has lived the same event again and again and thus carries much more information than other people, sometimes to his benefit, other times not so much.
You have to listen to me. Your very lives depend on it.
1 minute!
Same with goal, stakes, and urgency. Our main objective is to learn to fight with the exosuit well enough to get off the beach with Rita and then find and destroy the Omega that our time ability allows us to locate. Whereas the combination of stakes and urgency comes from the fact that we're allowed to witness the terrible thing that happens if we fail, as well as the fact that with each time reset the Omega gets closer to us like an alien Eye of Sauron, and that we can lose our ability, which makes actual death feel that much more scary.
You get injured on the field, you better make sure you die. I woke up in a field hospital with 3 pints of someone else's blood, and I was out.
A lot of locations and their contents as well share that same special source, not only with the exosuit assault beach, but also in smaller places like Cage and Rita's meeting room, which has these deadly training devices to simulate alien attacks to add that extra sense of dangerous excitement. I mean, even at the army headquarters, Cage specifically navigates through it with the same fail and learn tactic as at the beach.
The guy with the yellow armband always recognizes you. Stay to my right.
Which makes this very ordinary location play out in a much more uniquely entertaining way. Not to mention that the entire second act is basically a never-ending list of setups and payoffs.
Private Cage, J-Squad.
J-Squad. This is Rita Vertasky.
It's really satisfying to see Cage come across these big and small things and then work them out in another loop. It's always satisfying for the audience to spend time on something and then have it come back later to warrant that time. In here, just as in Back to the Future. Again, please watch the full thing and all the scenes with this in mind yourself, but the point is that the filmmakers view most of the middle as a sort of fun and game section where they go all out on the conceptual elements in order to deliver a uniquely special experience. Use what you have to do things only you can as much as you can, because otherwise, what's the point of having it at all? The ending concept lesson to learn here is how Live Die Repeat doesn't let its conceptual elements come in the way of an intimately, personally emotional finale. So like I mentioned, Cage's mission to get him and Rita off the beach is all fun and games until eventually it isn't. Eventually we have to face the consequences of spending all day every day with this woman who we see die time and time again. And soon after, we leave behind the excitement of the beach. We leave behind the exosuits and alien warfare and for a moment just focus on these people, which allows us to realize that Cage has grown too close to Rita to let go of her anymore.
And if I go on and kill the Omega, you're dead. Forever.
As well as that the reason Rita keeps trying to be so coldly distant is because she knows from experience what it's like to lose someone important again and again.
I watched him die 300 times and I remember every detail. I remember everything. So if you knew what was good for you, you wouldn't want to get to know me either.
All of which is crucial for us to understand their feelings for each other so that we can then feel for their relationship and them. A lot of the big conceptual elements on the surface do take a back seat, but it's a necessary price to pay in exchange for intimate emotion.
What are you still doing here? You're wasting time.
Rita, if you start that engine, you die.
And the further toward the end we go, the more the concept is pulled back. When we finally find out the true location of the Omega and prepare to go defeat it once and for all, we get in an accident and then lose the time loop ability as a result. Which is obviously a bummer because it's such a key ingredient of the movie, but ultimately the only way for the finale to have an increased sense of real dreadful stakes, as a finale should, is by getting rid of the safety net. Whereas location switches from an exciting warfare beach to a quiet nighttime Paris. There are aliens and quick spurts of action here, but not in the same bombastic way. Now it's much more war of attrition than excess. We're not fighting as much as we're trying to survive long enough to reach the Omega.
Where's Skinner and Griff?
They're not coming!
It may not be exo-suit extravaganza anymore, but the trade-off is that since less is happening, the more value is carried by each action and choice that does happen. In this fight, we're not cheering so much as we're holding our breath. I mean, at the very end, there is no more time loop, no more exosuits, no more human or alien armies. It's just two people we care about in a small dark space trying to get past one monster to blow up its nest. Which is a far cry from the concept-heavy excitement of the fun and games section, but at the same time, much more intimately emotionally powerful than it could ever be. The point is that no matter how amazing or special your concept is, it will never leave as much of a mark as the most basic raw human emotion. Leo DiCaprio simply walking into his old home to confront the memory of his dead wife will always carry a bigger impact than a nameless protagonist fighting a faceless army while two timelines crash in on each other. The middle is where you want to dazzle audiences with unique, loud and fun, but at the end it's the familiar opposite that counts. That's why Civil War, for example, will always be remembered further than that other superhero finale you already forgot. Don't completely toss your conceptual elements aside, but the further you go, be prepared to sacrifice under superficial quantity in favor of deeply personally emotional quality. Because all in all, the ultimate high concept structure that you should learn from Live Die Repeat is essentially this. The beginning is where you sell people, the middle is where you impress people, and the end is what you leave people with.
I need to know now. Know now. Can you please make a sequel?